Jocelyn, welcome.
Thank you, Magdalena. It's nice to be here.
Today's episode is around mental health. You are a mental health coach and researcher. You have a business in this space. You have most recently written a book on this topic. So we have a lot to talk about. But why don't we start with how does one become a mental health coach? How did you end up in this space?
That's a great question. So it was an evolution for me. A decade ago, I did training as a coach, and coaching helped me with my mental health. So over the years, I knew that meant that coaching was a tool to support us in our mental health. And there wasn't anything being offered in this space. It wasn't until just before the pandemic, and the pandemic that this topic really started to explode because people's mental health was really being challenged. And I just took it one step at a time. I became a coach and then I became a registered health coach. And then I really focused on mental health with my master's in the psychology and neuroscience of mental health and continued to research in this space. And then I wrote a book with all of the knowledge that I'd accumulated from all of those trainings in order to help people take a holistic, proactive approach to their mental health and well being in an era where it's really, really needed across multiple generations.
And do you find that businesses are more open to this topic?
Businesses are more open to this topic. It's been an ebb and a flow, I believe, in finding the right way to approach it. When I first started with mental health specifically 5 years ago, um, I brought this topic to some leaders to ask if we could talk about mental health and coaching or health and coaching and its intricate link in performance. People didn't understand really what I was talking about at that time. And so I decided just to continue to carry forward with it for myself. And the more that I talk about it, the more that it continued to expand. And then again, the pandemic accelerated all of this. And so now I think it's a really imperative part of a business strategy. Mental health is not an individual problem, especially in the workplace. It's a collective challenge to address because we know that um, regardless of what our own mental health is, it's the environments that we're in, the people that we're around, all also impact our mental health. So there's a multi-pronged approach that we need to be taking inside organizations in order to really support mental health and performance. Because I think that's the really intricate link is that people want to do well, and organizations are focused on output and impact and bottom line, and we need to take care of the people who are doing those things along the way because then we will be our best and then the organization will get the most out of creativity, agility, um, impact. And those are the things that I really focus on when speaking with organizations and their mental health strategy.
Yeah. And I find that you need to be able to find that one or two or three leaders that are really passionate about this topic and are truly big advocates for this topic for
Mhm.
it to just kind of launch. Because I know organizations that have sort of well-being as part of their offering, but it just sits on the shelf
Mhm.
until you have a leader, probably most importantly at the senior level,
Yes.
that actually takes it and says, "Hey, we're going to talk about this."
Mhm. I wanna yeah, and that's a really important piece of it. It's integrated into leadership right now, and so I know a
Yes.
lot of organizations were training leaders in, um, mental health first aid and things like that, and we need to integrate it into how we lead. If we're a leader inside of an organization, we need to integrate the 5 elements into how we lead and how we support others in order to really, have it be a part of the culture and a part of the fabric. It's not, an app online. It's not living in the EAP, in a portal that people don't access and have trouble accessing. It's living in the very day-to-day integration of the business.
Yeah, I love that. That's exactly it. That's one of the key things that I found in my role, sort of supporting leaders in organizations, is that some truly live by example. in their day to day, you seeing it. Others, not so much. They'll say the right words, but they're not exemplifying it themselves in their day to day with their teams. And that obviously sends a very, different message. You're telling me that mental health is important, but yet you're not encouraging it or supporting it in the day to day.
Oh, that's huge. That is a huge I just wrote a blog about this. It's about walking the walk and talking the talk as leaders and as an organization. So whether
Yeah.
we're talking about living into the mission, vision, and values, like really wholly truly, or we're talking about living into uh, well leadership, it's all about the integrity piece of it all. And I think that's the important piece of some of the work that I do is helping leaders do it for themselves first. Because until we can do it for ourselves, we will say the thing but not do it. And then
Yes.
there's that disintegrity that happens when leaders are trying to say to their team, "This is what you need to do," but they're not doing the same for themselves. So it's about that alignment from a leadership perspective. Because when people can do it for themselves, then they're able to hold space and navigate it with others.
Yeah. And sometimes I think that maybe some leaders need that permission,
Mm,
to do it. I know I did my best throughout my years to sort of lead by example. One of the key things that I've always done is walking and talking meetings, especially in the past 5 years
mm,
since we started working from home. It was important to me. I kind of refresh and get re-energized by walking and talking. So I would take some meetings, like I would look at my calendar every day and say, okay, which meeting can I actually do outside so I don't have to share documents and have those conversations. And I try to lead by example. But there were certain times where, I would get some leaders, I could hear it in their voice. They're like, what are you doing? Right. But I'm like, if there's one person, if there's one department that's going to push this through, it's going to be human
mhm,
resources, right? We're expected to lead by example, coach and advise our leaders to do the same. But I want to say we're getting there, but it's micro steps. It's like
mhm,
baby steps, you know?
mhm,
It's hit and miss.
mhm.
It really depends on so many different things.
Yes, I love that because it's all of the should programming. We should be working this way. We're meant to be on Zoom. Actually, our brains are over capacity from too many
Yes.
meetings. It's our when we're talking the burnout conversation. I mean, we're still talking about burnout right now. We're talking about
Yeah.
managing stress. If we get ourselves off of a screen, our brains have an opportunity within that day to recover before it gets to burnout, weeks or months or years later. And so that piece of giving our brain a cognitive break throughout the day, some people have a really hard time with it because they're like, oh, I'm on the clock. I need to be doing this. But the reality is, if you give yourself 5 minutes every hour for a walk
Yeah.
around the block, you're gonna be better. You're gonna be higher performing because you're gonna be more resourced and you're gonna be able to repeat that. So when we talk about repeatable strategies, we're talking about repeatable strategies from a human perspective as well.
Yes, yeah. I remember as soon as the pandemic kicked off and we all transitioned to Zoom, there was a research study that came out very soon, after that I was reading and sharing with my leaders around Zoom
Mm,
and that the brain capacity it takes to focus, especially so right now it's just you and I, but when on the screen you have like 30 squares,
mhm,
your brain is overworked because it doesn't know where you're talking,
mhm.
and then they start messaging you at the same time.
Yes.
Your brain is so overwhelmed in comparison if you were sitting in a room with Jocelyn in front of me, or even in a boardroom with
Mm.
10 people. It's a very different way of sort of taking the capacity from your brain. It's two different things.
Yes, and what I love about that is it talks to you a little bit about this on camera, off camera, and I know there's a lot of disengagement with off camera folks on
Yeah.
digital meetings. But here's the thing: what we need to practice is a soft focus. We don't need to stare at the screen and have our eyes blazing into it. We can look outside. It doesn't mean we're not listening. It actually probably means we're listening a little bit more because they often say just like shifting your eyes, like that gives you that flexibility. And it's interesting because I learned this after my brain injury. I went through um, neural optometry reprogramming because the nerves, the occipital nerves, were the ones that were damaged, and I couldn't even be on a screen. So I've had to learn to be a little bit less focused because my default is to be intentional and very
Yeah.
focused. But our brains actually from a nerve perspective and how the eyes work need to be moving around more. So when you're in a boardroom, you're not like eyes ablazing on the person. So there's a lot of important, just little tiny things that we can do in order to stay engaged, but also take care of our brain.
And so is that what you do with your business when you go into a company? Do you talk about these type of strategies? Because I think that's very impactful. Because I think one of the things that's been it's like, for instance, I know that walking and talking is good for me. Just intuitively, I know it's good because I feel better. But I don't know if I have the research behind it to be able to explain to someone why it's good for you. But
Mm.
obviously you have a lot of that. So is that what you do when you go into companies? You kind of share all the different strategies with them?
Absolutely. So, I do a lot of keynote talking. I do a lot of training and development and one-to-one coaching in the leadership space and across organizations. And it's always giving tips and tools to take care of our brain health. And so when we think about brain health, it's all encompassing. So it's mental health, it's brain health, it's cognitive performance, which is what we want from employees inside of an organization. So we want their brains working, but we also want their hearts working. Like we want the whole body working. So it's
Yeah.
cognitive performance. And then any of these tips, tools, and strategies for brain health are helping with longevity and the entire conversation around neurodegenerative disease, because I follow a lot around just the whole life cycle of the brain. So when we're talking about these tips and tools, we're not talking about it just from a mental health, depression, anxiety, suicide, addiction conversation. We're talking about it from an overall brain health and longevity conversation, because the reality is the workforce is working longer. And
Yeah.
so that brain is engaged longer, which is actually good for our brains, but we want to be taking care of it in a way that's healthy and well, because we don't want to be working towards burnout all the way through until when we're meant to be retiring, and then the brain isn't functioning well, or we haven't taken care of it well enough, and then we all of a sudden we're spending the back half of our life in poor brain health. So this is about a whole life span of how we take care of our brain, and we spend most of our time at work. That's the reality. So
Yeah.
this is the place where we have an opportunity to really leverage this. And especially in an era where AI is coming in, we can talk about the human approach to leadership and organizations, and then the AI is going to do its thing. And maybe it's going to help increase capacity too.
And so how do we take care of our brain? What are the things that we should be doing?
So in my book, Claim Your Brain, I have a model. And so I've built that from a coaching perspective. It's a mental health coaching model. It starts with social well-being in the middle. So if you think about a circle, and then there's three circles around, and then a giant circle around that, the first step of taking care of our brains is our relationship to ourselves. So that's where we
Mhm.
get to acknowledge any kind of past psychological stress, burnout, overwhelm, childhood traumas, or any type of traumas, big or little, because most of us are experiencing something in our lives that's a traumatic event, whether it was in our childhood, whether it was a divorce, whether it's losing a job. All of those have a hit on our mental well being. So it's realigning that relationship with ourselves first. And then that then impacts our relationship with others. So whether that's our relationship with our families, our relationship with our teams inside of our organizations, or our relationship in our community, we're losing that social well-being piece. And that is also a contributor to poor mental health. Is we are connected this way in the computer, but we are not connected truly wholly nervous system to nervous system, which is where healthy connection thrives. So that's step
Yeah.
one. Step two is the physical well-being, and that's nourishing our bodies versus numbing. A lot of what we do today is around numbing. We don't want to feel our emotions. We don't want to deal with things. So we, go for a drink after work, or we choose unhealthy things versus going for a walk. Engaging with somebody, playing a game with our kids, like a board game, going back to those types of connections. And so, really focusing on nourishing our bodies and following our own biological rhythms. That's important for men and women too, because um, men are on a diurnal hormonal cycle, which is 24 hours, and women are on 7-day cycles. So we work entirely differently. So honoring that is really important. Emotional well-being, there's so much to be emotional right now about, and so taking care of that. And then mental well-being, the inner dialogue and how we speak to ourselves, and really working to reprogram the neuroplasticity of our minds. And then the giant hug around the model is spiritual well being. So, however, people connect to that is their personal preference, but it can be nature, it can be religion, it can be spirituality. So, the spiritual well being piece is all around us. I mean, we are interconnected in this world. We are part of nature. We are not separate from nature. So the more we can get our minds and our bodies outside and integrated, there's so much research about nature and well-being, and there's states, provinces, countries. That's become a medical RX these days. Is get out into nature.
Yeah. There's this one gentleman that I follow on social. He's from Europe. He's Italian,
Mhm.
and he spends a lot of time talking about the North American culture, and he compares it to European culture, specifically Italian culture.
Mm.
And in a way, he's just kind of, um, you know, in some ways laughing at us in North America, saying that you guys are so individualistic.
Yeah.
Everything that you do is for yourself. And no wonder you guys are so sick
Mhm.
in every way, physically, emotionally, because you don't have a village that actually supports you.
Mhm.
We do. They still do. In 2025 in Italy, the whole, family comes together when, a mother gives birth, to help her out in the first, few weeks, few days, whatever it may be. If you're starting a business, they all truly come together. They live close to one another. And it's so interesting when I listen to him, I'm like, wow, there are differences. There truly are differences. And I could see how that impacts us, individually, our mental health.
100%. Yeah, and that's a lot of what the book, my book is about, is merging Eastern and Western medicines. The West is sick, and so we can't just have a science-focused approach. My book is science and soul, and the soul piece is merging, indigenous practices, ancient traditions and wisdom, Eastern philosophies on how to take care of our mental health and well-being, and science is studying it, and it now needs to be integrated. So we have a
Yeah.
lot of great medical, technical, logical advancements in the West, and we also have a lot of ancient wisdom that's been like
Yeah.
kind of suppressed that needs to come back to the surface, and it needs to be integrated into a whole person approach.
I love that. Um, One thing I wanted to share with you, I don't know if you've heard of electromagnetic testing.
Mm.
New sort of innovative tool that's available to us, to do sort of diagnostic type of analysis if you're experiencing something. I've been very sort of open about sharing sort of my own health issues that started 2.5 years ago that I'm still working through. And it sort of felt like I was at the end. I couldn't find really any answers to everything that was happening to me. And there was a lot, physically that was happening to me, not necessarily mentally, but physically. Anyways, I heard about this electromagnetic testing that this wellness clinic was doing up north, in King City. So I went and I tried it out. It's you get connected to these magnets for like 15-20 minutes, and it spits out this report. It's like 500 pages long, and it literally talks about anything and everything that's happening in your body. And I had questions, I had doubts. I'm like, I don't know how accurate this thing will be, but at this point, I'm willing to give any chance. Anyways, it spit out this 500-page long document, which is basically like a manual for my body. And it talks about everything from my emotions to my energy to my organs to my blood work, to you name it. And I couldn't, and so it really sort of connects. It's all about connecting your emotions, your energy, your body, how everything sort of, it's the most beautiful thing.
Wow.
I'm still studying it. I'm still reviewing it, but there's so much in there
Mm.
that I could not get from Western medicine when I was going to see all these specialists, and they're just kind of looking at very hard data. Um, this is something very different, but wow, is it comprehensive? And there's so much there, and a lot of it makes so much sense. And I'm a true believer now. I had questions before, but when I look at it now, so much of it makes sense. So much of it makes sense.
Mhm. Our body talks. And when we slow down, we're not slow enough in the West to listen to our bodies. We're too quick.
Yes.
And I know that from my own personal experience. I was coming out of a divorce, training for triathlons, moving so fast. It was like accomplish, accomplish, accomplish. But the universe slowed me down with a cycling accident. unconscious on the side of the road, and I've had no choice but to shift how quickly I move because my brain doesn't work at the same capacity as it used to. We need to
Yeah.
slow down and ask our body what it's telling us
Yeah.
and
Yeah. And let's talk about that a little bit more. That
sure.
sort of sort of incident that happened in your life. Talk to us about what happened and how you recovered, and how do you take that and then write a book? Because that in itself is such a big deal,
Mhm.
right?
Yes, thank you. So I needed to lean into community. I needed to lean into community. I was training for a triathlon one early morning on a weekend. I was ready to tackle a podium. My last triathlon, I was so close, and I really, really wanted that. And it had never been something on my radar, but it was a place of healing and solace for me at that time in my life because I need to move. I need to move my energy. But what happened was I was too close to the rider in front of me. I was on a triathlon bike. I did not have my brakes handy, and I my brain shut down before anything happened. I do not remember a single thing until I was waking up being put on a flat board with my neck being immobilized, and my jaw was displaced, my teeth were missing, and alls I kept asking and thinking and trying to wiggle my fingers and toes was like, "Am I okay? Like, am I gonna be okay? Am I paralyzed? Like, what's going on here?" Um, so that was the least of my worries was the physical pain and the physical displacement. I spent so much time recovering with so many different practitioners because we're just starting to really realize like concussion and women experience concussion incredibly differently because of the brain makeup and the brain chemistry. So nobody was talking about that. I've learned that in my own research. And from there, uh, I had to put my master's on hold because this accident was 1 month after I started my master's to heal and recover. And I couldn't drive, I couldn't work. I couldn't take my son to hockey because the arena was so bright. I needed to sleep. It was crazy. Or I was wearing sunglasses in the hockey arena, which was, silly, but it's the only way I could do it. But I had to do one thing. Like I couldn't exercise, work, take care of my kids. I could do one of the things that I used to do. And I actually was afraid to walk the very first day. So that's how traumatized my nervous system was. And it wasn't until recently, like this is coming up on 4.5 years ago. And it wasn't until recently that I lost the vertigo. I used to not be able to go over the skyway bridges because I felt like I was going to fall off. I had like
Oh,
some ingrained fear in my body. I would have to go so slow, like dangerously slow, because my whole body was in panic. And it was irrational because it was a bridge and I was in a car, had nothing to do with a bike or my brain even. But the height, something was up in my brain in the way that it was recovering that wouldn't allow me through that. So I had to put my master's on hold. I did pick it back up again, and I did it with very great intention because I knew that in order to increase neuroplasticity and heal my brain, learning was a big part of that. I struggled still with it, but I did it, and I think that was a really good use of my brain energy because they do say now with concussion to slowly get back to your everyday as well as you can without overdoing it. Um, so there was that. And then I engaged a community to just help me heal and lean in to friends and family and go much slower. So having much more compassion with myself. And then I decided to do the book and I hired a company to help me kind of organize everything and take me through all the editing, all the writing, getting it published online. And they were incredible. And so that took me to where I am today. And it's still like I still have good days and bad days. It's like some days I wake up and my brain's working okay, and some days not. And even like I have a dark circle under my eye. Like I think there's always something going on because I hit my head here. Um,
oh
yeah,
gosh.
so it's and I go for nerve treatment at McMaster still because of the nerve damage in the back of my neck. So it's an ongoing journey, but I've learned how to navigate it and a lot of the tools I share in the book are about brain health like eating a Mediterranean style diet like we're talking about in the European culture. It's not the Western style of eating and that's what our brain needs because any type of stress or inflammation, and inflammation comes from our diet, from, not exercising or moving enough. That neuroinflammation is what I did my master's thesis on. Neuroinflammation in the brain specifically, because stress is a huge cause of that. And that can come from all different forms, like what we eat, how we move or not, social relationships, and the level of stress they bring to us. So the model really talks a little bit about that as well.
And so was your treatment a combination of Western and Eastern medicine?
I used Western medicine, and I really leaned into alternative or complementary therapies. So the neuroloptometrist, osteopathy, realigning me, lots of different other strategies and treatments that were more of complementary medicine, because at the end of the day, that was where I was getting the greatest relief through the healing journey.
And so we just touched on sort of, having a village. Did you have a village to support you? Because I can imagine if you're sort of on your own with three kids, you can't work, you can't take care of them, you can't take care of yourself. And this is obviously took many months, years to
Mhm,
recover.
mhm.
Was there to support you? And was there someone to support you?
I have a really supportive community. I do a lot independently. It's like my natural strategy. It's my coping mechanism is super independent. However, I leaned into friends and family and my partner. My kids, obviously, incredibly compassionate and understanding. But the community that I leaned into were all the practitioners that I had to work with as well. At any given
Mhm.
time, I had to be working with multiple practitioners, and I had to find that on my own. And that was the frustrating thing. It
Yeah.
wasn't like, here's your manual for how to recover from a concussion. The hospital did what they were trained to do. They did the MRI, they checked my brain. There was no bleeding, so that was positive. I had to go to Toronto um and heal my jaw and everything twice a week and things like that. But that was working with TMJ specialists to fix my jaw. Then I had to do, going with the dentist to fix my teeth. And then I had to piece all that together. Leaving the hospital, they're like, your brain's not bleeding, so you're good. They put me out that very same day, and then there was nothing about, like, okay, so now what? I had no
Yes.
idea what to do, and so I had to find that bit by bit. But at any given time, I was working with, my naturopath was helping me with supplements and things for brain recovery and mitigating any kind of inflammation in my body. Like, I was working with so many professionals.
Yes. And that in itself is a full-time job as I'm learning, right?
Yes.
The appointments, like staying on top of the appointments, following up and asking questions and doing your research. Because I'm pretty sure you're like me, like, okay, I need to understand this a little bit more before, I go ahead and sort of book this appointment. That in itself is so overwhelming, right? And when you're going through what you're going through,
Mm.
wow.
Yeah, and it's expensive because it's all not covered by our medical system.
Yes, absolutely. And so do you find that now that you're in this space, you're sort of raising your kids differently? So what are you doing with your kids that would be sort of different from, let's say, 10, 15 years ago?
I think what my kids would say is, I used to be very curious. Like, I was asking a lot of questions, and they were always like, "Can you stop asking us so many questions?" I'm like, I want an open dialogue. So I raise my kids with, like, curiosity, with open dialogue. I raise them in this framework that I've created, taking care
Yeah,
of their, making sure that they're following their own curiosity, staying on their own aligned path, trusting their own intuition. Um,
yeah,
not driving them to anything, but like, not driving them in a car, but like not driving them to do anything unless it was their decision, their choice, what they wanted, and just encouraging them in that space. But also, just the acknowledgement, the acknowledging their resiliency, acknowledging any type of mental health challenges that they've gone through, getting them the support that they need, was all a part of how we raised them. And it's cute because my eldest daughter is now studying clinical psychology, and she came home this summer and was doing all the things that I do. And it's not, they don't do as you say, eventually they do as you do. So if
yeah.
we're not leading by example, just like we talked about leaders in an organization, if we're not leading by example as parents, and
Yes.
we're, you know, our kids see us over drinking, or, numbing ourselves or binging our TV or on our phone all the time. They will do as we do, not what we say. So that's really, I've modeled that because that was part of what came for me after the concussion, because alcohol is a neuroinflammatory substance. That's just the truth. So I
Yeah.
stopped drinking in its entirety because of the concussion, and I wasn't recovering. And I wasn't drinking much at the time, maybe a glass of wine every once in a while, but still, that was really bad for me. And the research and studies, again, with women's brains and women's mental health, especially any women in perimenopause and menopause, the alcohol
Yeah.
combination is very bad for the brain. So that's not to say you can't enjoy like a champagne toast or a cheers once in a while, but I think there's a really important message to uh, our generation specifically, because I think the younger generations are already drinking less because they have more knowledge and education around it. But for our generation and above, the the alcohol is a real factor. So it's leading, I would say, like raising the kids, it's really leading by example.
Yeah. And you often talk about sort of, looking okay on the outside, but feeling otherwise inside. And I have to think that as you're going through this recovery, you're not feeling well most of the time, 90% of the time. And so are you, as you're going through this, are you actually showing and talking about this with your kids, or are you smiling and pretending that everything is okay? Because I'll tell you, that's my struggle with my own sort of health issues over the past 2.5 years. Every day is a struggle. And I feel like I need to show up, like I'm showing up for this podcast, but this is going to cost me, once I hang up,
Yeah.
it's going to cost me a lot of energy in recovery, right? Because I often hear from people like, wow, you show up so happy and social. I'm like, I know, but do you know how long it takes me to recover,
Hmm.
or how much energy buildup I need to do to actually do that?
Hmm.
Like, it comes with a cost. So talk to me about how you're showing up in front of your kids.
Yeah, probably a little bit of both. I'd be curious to hear what they would say. I've really tried to navigate the on share enough that they're aware that we're human, and
Yeah.
share too much to overburden them with like,
Yes.
their what's happening for me, because they need to focus on them. Uh,
Yeah.
but I can share from my son was in hockey. He had a bunch of concussions. My daughter just had a concussion. And I can talk to them just like from experience. So, here's what I struggled with. Like, so it makes sense that you're struggling with these types of things. So I really try to find the balance of honesty, enough honesty that
Yeah.
there's a acknowledgement we're all human, but I definitely think I'm an overachiever, overcompensator, trying to recover from that hyper independence piece. And especially because I've lived alone, raising them for the past decade. So there's a piece of me that when you ask that question, I'm like, I probably haven't like shared a lot. Um, but if they see me crying, I'll say I'm sad, or if
Yeah.
or I'll say I'm just feeling overwhelmed. Or with the girls, we talk tons about the hormones.
Yeah.
So having really honest conversations about that. Where are you in your cycle? Okay, that makes sense that you're feeling this way. So those types of conversations. And just sharing anything that I learn in the research that I do. I'll just dribble drabble it in. And then with my son, just making it really real that you know, boys have emotions and are it's really important to talk about them, and making sure that he's really in integrity with his words and how he talks and how he is in relation. And then I witness them, and I'm so proud. I'm so proud of how they are choosing to show up in the world. And that's all
Yeah.
of them.
Yeah. And yeah, and I love what you're saying, because, it is an art, right? And I
Mm.
feel like I'm figuring it out with them.
Mhm.
And then also how you show up at work, like how much do you share? How much do you not
Yeah.
share? I was thinking about, like, I don't want to come across as a victim, but yet if I don't tell them that I'm
Yeah.
not, I'm gonna feel like, what? You're smiling.
Yeah.
You're dressed. You have makeup on. You're talking. You're walking. What do you mean, right? Unless you actually tell them. And I think that's the issue with mental health. Like, I can sit here and pretend I'm all good, but inside I'm not.
Mhm.
And how do we give ourselves the permission and the courage to say that? And I do my best to do that, and I do that on social as well, because it really disappoints me when I hear from people, oh, you look so happy, and but no, I'm also human.
Mhm.
So let me tell you about the days where I'm not happy. Let me tell you about what's not working, because I don't want you to have this impression that everything is great because it's not. And I'm still trying to figure out how to share it with people. And it's just, it feels overwhelming sometimes.
Oh, yeah, I can really appreciate where you're at in like that, really being mindful of it, and personally and professionally as well. It's how much are we comfortable sharing, and how much are we
Yes.
not comfortable sharing, and how do we approach that? I can really appreciate that. It's a lot of emotional load too when you take so much consideration and thought and
Yeah.
put it into it, because that takes the brain energy as well. Um,
Yeah.
but that's the paradox of life, and I do talk about that in my book. The paradox of life is I was high achieving, overachieving,
Yeah.
what people would say, doing so great. I loved my kids. I love being a mom. I had a great people in my life, great supports. But on the inside, I was absolutely crumbling,
Yes.
and I was holding it all together until I wasn't.
Yes. And and so was it when you had the accident? That's when everything sort of fell apart and you're like, okay, need to do this differently.
I think that there was, there was a lot of things happening for me. My divorce was the first thing that was a catalyst. That was my lowest point in my life, where I really just wished I was in the hospital so someone could take care of me. That was number one, and then recovering from that through this decade, and then the brain injury. Like, I came out of that like a slingshot. So I was like, I'm gonna overachieve, train for a triathlon, be an amazing mom, be there for all the things, and then all of a sudden, then I was, like, in burnout. I took a leave of absence from work.
Yeah.
That was I never thought I would do that, and that was, like, a huge thing.
Yeah.
But that has a ripple effect too, because I was so high achieving and overachieving. I overachieved into a place where it had a negative impact on other people around me. Um,
Yeah.
and it wasn't the workplace culture. It really wasn't. It was my own internal drives to excel. Um, so there was that, and then the brain injury was just like the icing on the cake. Like, you're not listening, girl. Slow down, because we're
Yeah.
now you're slow. Now you have no choice but to be slow.
Yes. Yeah. And you touch on sort of the difference between men and women. And do you find that we as women do this more? I want to say we do. Like we pretend that everything is okay, but on the inside, or do you find that it's equal?
Okay, so there's a lot of research on this, and men and women just have different coping mechanisms. Men are also suppressing their emotions. Women are
Mm,
also suppressing their emotions and showing up the best they can. So the differentiator is the coping mechanisms. Men choose numbing through addiction, typically, or suicide. So from a mental health perspective, those are the two places.
mhm.
And then women are internalizing and suppressing, but then they experience anxiety and depression. So that's the
Interesting.
way emotional suppression is showing up for both, and that's how it manifests in mental health. So we're all doing it, and the more we can all talk about it, the better. When I do keynotes, one of the experiences that is so heart opening for me is the people that come up to me after the talk to say thank you. I think
Yeah.
women have more community to talk about these things, and men really don't. So this is such important conversation for men. When people ask if my book is written for women, it's not. My journey is one of a daughter and a wife and a mother, but uh, this book is for everybody to claim their mental health and claim their brain, because until we all do it, none of us are advancing. Because my mental health didn't decline in isolation. There was people in my life who struggled with their mental health, and I just took it all on.
Yes. Yes. It's like a domino effect.
Exactly.
Because we all care for one another. It's, I'm going to support you by whether you're listening, you're kind of, doing your best to show up in the places that this person can't show up. You're taking more on. Absolutely. That makes so much sense.
So the work is the same for all genders. It's how are we learning how to suppress less and have
Yeah.
healthy ways of taking care of our brains and our bodies.
And do you find that that's resonating with sort of the audiences that you're speaking to, specifically in the workplace? Like, what is the reaction that you're getting these days?
Mhm. So Everybody relates at a different level. When I talk about the model, people relate to different parts of the model. So that
Yeah.
is one way that people are relating to what I'm saying. And then any of the tips and tools I share, people will relate to one thing or another thing. And then if it's my story, people will relate to my story in a specific way. So there's multiple ways that people are relating to what I'm saying. And they almost always there's a lineup of people coming back to say, "Thank you. This is what resonated for me," or "Thank you. This has given me more compassion for the women in my life," or "Thank you. This is how I'm showing up as a parent right now, and what you just said is gonna make me think differently." So it's so many different things, and that's what I love about it is everybody takes the one thing, and we also talk about that in the book. This is not prescriptive or directive. Whatever
Yeah.
resonates for you in the tools shared is the thing that you need to work on right now, because then maybe in 6 months or a year from now, something different's gonna resonate for you in the tools because you've taken the thing that was most, relevant at that time in your stage of life and worked with that model or that tool.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, so what's next for your book? Is it just sort of a tour and just speaking engagements? What is your goal with the book?
So I've been working a lot in the speaking, and most typically organizations purchase the book or have the book available for purchase for their employees, for their staff. We're coming up on Christmas holidays. So um, in teams buying books. There's a bulk discount on my website. So if people want to buy 10 books for a book club, I'll come and do a free talk in the book club. If people want to buy 25 books for a team, I'll come and do a free talk and Q&A for the team. So there's lots of ways that we're working to get the book out in the world, whether it's direct to consumer or business to business. And the main thing that's happening right now is keynotes and working with, anywhere from sales teams. I did a sales conference in the spring, to wellness conferences in North America, both and are all happening. And also working in a consultative basis and training around all the topics that are really relevant in the organization for mental health. I'm building out a session right now on money and mental health and how people relate to money. And it's a really stressful time right now for some people. So there's some on-demand products that are being created, in training and facilitation and keynotes that are really, needed or resonated for the audience.
And what about writing the book itself? Just for people that might be thinking about it, have it in the back of their mind. How do you start that process? What are some of the things that you can share best practices with people?
Okay, so the writing of my story was the most interesting part because I was like, "Oh, yeah, I'm just gonna write my story, no big deal, I've lived it." But it brought a lot of emotion to write it in a way that was really about me and how I internalized a lot and the mental health challenges that that had from the environments or the circumstances of people in my life. Um, so being very mindful, but also it brought like a level of gratitude because I have lived a great life and I suffered a ton in my mental health. So like just that recognizing that paradox, there was a gratitude piece. So the writing of the story, this is just my story. Every single one of us has one. I'm only
Yeah.
sharing it so people know that it's safe to share their story and be human, and we don't have to hide parts of ourselves or live in shame about any of it. It's just human existence. um,
Yeah.
and through storytelling we create connection, so that's the storytelling piece. So if you're thinking about your own story or your own book, there's a really therapeutic healing part of it, and it just creates connection, and so that deeper connection is where we find deeper well-being. And then from, like, just the tools part of it, it was all in my brain and what I knew. And so for me, I needed to work with somebody, I needed to be in community, so that really worked for me. So I worked with a company to do that, and then, my best friend has a publishing company, Up Level Productions, so that was part of the journey. And yeah, it was just, getting support along the way. It took about a year to from when I engaged people to help me to when I published and promoted it. So that was a year-long adventure, and it could be done in a shorter period of time. But, I learned a lot, and I will most likely write another book. I never thought I was an author. It was never on my radar, but here I am. And I love research, so I'll probably write another book, and that'll be come out, I don't know, who knows when. I'm not gonna put a timeline on it, but it feels like it's still in there.
I love it. And so throughout that year, as you're writing the book,
Yeah.
so are you applying to someone that kind of holds you accountable chapter by chapter? Like, what does that look like? Because I could see,
Mm.
you know, that being a bit messy.
Yes, it is a bit hectic. There's deadlines. Yes, there are deadlines that we and a timeline that we followed. So,
Yeah.
once we had the full complete manuscript done, we had content reviews, we had fact checks, we had copy edits, all kinds of editing phases to make sure it was great, image production, those types of things. So, there was a strict timeline on the things that we needed to get done by when, because I had a specific date in mind in order to publish it in May, which was Mental Health Month. That was
Yeah.
important. That was symbolic for me. And yeah, that timeline was crucial because without it, would have taken a lot longer, I'm sure. And it was flexible because the only thing that was there was my own deadline and date of publishing. If I didn't have that, we could have been more flexible. But I've learned a ton of lessons. So when I go to do this again, it'll probably be much smoother.
Yes, I'm sure. It's like someone I was speaking to yesterday, the guest that I had, her and her husband created a product, and now they're on their third one. They're thinking about the fourth because once you do one, the first one feels overwhelming, but once you do it, you know the ins and outs. You have the connections. It's so much easier to do it the second and the third time around. Now, one
Mhm.
last question on this book piece. So, does a publishing company have to sort of align with the topic for the book? Like, do they have to sort of buy into it, or will they publish pretty much anything anyone brings to their table?
That's a good question. I don't know specifically, but the people that I worked with, it could be on anything, and then the people that they bring into the project have experience in those specific things. So, like I said, when I submitted uh, my copy edit, it was a professor that reviewed it. So from one of the higher education universities in the US who has experience in this field. So that was the first copy
Yeah.
edit. He actually asked me to do a teen version and a child version. Um, so that was I think they just bring people into your project that have kind of interest or ability to write in that space. So whether you're writing fiction or nonfiction, I think your team gets built around what you're writing.
Yeah. Yeah. Anything else that you feel we need to touch on, Jocelyn, that you would like to sort of leave with the audience that we haven't touched on?
I think the most important message for people to hear is that when we all claim our brain, we have a positive ripple effect. Mental
Hmm.
health is not a individual problem. We don't fall to poor mental health in isolation. It's a collective to be talked about as a we. So whether we're collective as an organization, collective as a community, or collective as a family, how are we having these conversations around our brain and our mind and our body that brings us all together into a conversation? Because when we're in that space of moving from me to we have a positive ripple effect. And so claiming your brain is for this book is written for 18 plus. So it's for all people to go on a journey and take better care of their health, regardless of the age and stage they're at.
And where can people find your book?
Claim Your Brain is available at all major online retailers where you purchase books. It's also available at all places where you can purchase your digital books. It's just not on audiobook yet.
Got it. Well, Jocelyn, thank you so much for your time. I know this will be so helpful to so many. I certainly have learned a thing or two, and I can't wait to grab your book and read it and put some of what you have shared into practice. So, thank you for your time.
Yes, thank you for having me. This was a great, robust conversation.
Thank you.